If you're considering a move to the greater Charlotte area, it's probably pretty important to have an idea of what your monthly costs are going to be in the area or your cost of living. Well, in this video, we're going to do exactly that, which is help you break down what is the real cost of living in the greater Charlotte area and help compare and contrast some of the other popular areas, part of the greater Charlotte area, like York County, South Carolina, as well as Union County, North Carolina, so you can have a good picture of the Carolinas. And even taking it a step further, we're going to compare what it looks like in one of the popular areas that people are moving from, which is the Northeast or the New York, New Jersey area, so you can get an idea of that difference in cost of living when comparing the two. So stick around because we're going to give a nice overview so you can make the best decision for you of what it looks like to live in the Carolinas. First of all, when it comes to cost of living, a lot of numbers, percentages, costs are going to pop up. So I'm going to do the best job we can with showing those numbers and having some visual components for this overview, as well as some additional information in the notes down below that you can check out. But really looking at the Charlotte area as a whole, a positive is that 1% below that is what Charlotte is from a overall cost of living. Let me rephrase that. Charlotte is 1% cheaper overall compared to the greater cost of living in the United States. So a cost component here, housing being a huge part of that, coming in and saving a lot of that cost. According to PayScale and NerdWallet, the cost of even renting in Charlotte is 15 to 20% cheaper than the greater United States rental average. So quite a bit of savings in the area, but let's break down what that actually means in terms of cost and the overall cost of living. So while you're going to save on the overall cost of living according to or comparing the overall average of the United States, there are some costs that do come in a little bit higher than that national average. And the first would be groceries, which of course they're high enough as it is, but in the Charlotte area, they're roughly 1% higher than that average. So not substantially higher, but they are higher. You have a cost of fuel or gas in the area and utilities that run about 1 to 4% above the national average. So depending on where you're comparing, that average can be higher overall in the greater Charlotte area. As I mentioned earlier, housing is such a big part of cost of living that plays such a big factor in why the overall percentage is 1% lower than the average. So housing is just a great opportunity for a lot of people that are looking to move to the area to save some money on their cost of living. Let's talk about two super popular areas in the greater Charlotte area that relocators are jumping on or absolutely asking questions and comparing what these areas have from a cost of living compared to the greater Charlotte, Mecklenburg area. And the first area we're going to touch on is the York County, South Carolina area, which includes some very popular areas, including Fort Mill, Tega, into York, South Carolina. And these areas just south of the North Carolina, South Carolina border offer opportunities to have some cost savings, still commutable to uptown. But when you look at the cost of living, the home prices as an average come in quite a bit less than the Mecklenburg, the Charlotte area. And you're looking at prices that have ranged anywhere from $322,000, depending on the metric you're looking at, but they're right around the $320,000, $330,000 range for that average for the area. So when you're comparing that with the greater Mecklenburg County, Charlotte area, which is right around $450,000, there's a big discrepancy or big savings that can be had in the York County area. So a great place to start, especially if you consider comparing schools, comparing cost of living, there's some opportunities in York County that you may want to consider. With prices being 12% higher in the York County area than they were just a few years ago, they've continued to appreciate, and we don't see it slowing down, especially in areas like Fort Mill, where the highly rated schools and new developments popping up offer a lot of appreciation, people wanting to be in these areas. Then you look at some of the other stats that are important for comparing cost of living. Looking at York County right now, property taxes in York County are relatively low. Combined rates often in the 0.25% to 0.4%, which is the effective range depending on the specific area. We've talked about some of that in our previous Fort Mill videos, how that range in property taxes can vary. But a rule of thumb for comparing Mecklenburg County to York County or South Carolina in general is you're going to have less in taxes, property taxes, I should say, in the South Carolina area than the North Carolina or Mecklenburg County area for sure. Now we are comparing the Union County, North Carolina area, especially to the York County area. You're going to see a pretty big difference in the home values. And now we're taking the average, obviously. So you have the high end and you have the low end. In Union County, especially, you're going to have the super high end homes, whether it's in Marvin, one of the highest priced areas in all of North Carolina, that you have just super affluent areas in Marvin. You have Weddington, Waxhaw, that area in particular, a very high valued home, and cost of living obviously is different than some of the southern parts of Monroe, for example, that still have a lot of opportunity for development. There's a lot of land where the prices are going to be lower. But you still, looking at those averages, comparing Union County to York County, it's anywhere from 13 to 18%, even higher than the average of the York County area. And you are going to have more, in general, amenities or already developed areas in the Union County versus a lot of the York County areas. So there's trade-offs for that cost of living when you're comparing, like I said, York and Union County. And really the greater Charlotte area, which I mentioned before, if you're looking at the average price of home for the greater Charlotte as a whole, is right about $450,000 for your single family home. And we've seen a flattening of that number the past year and a half. So we're going to see we're seeing an estimated 1.5% appreciation as an average overall. So we're not going to see the 2021 post and during pandemic spiking in prices, but we're not seeing a decline in prices, even though they have already appreciated astronomically compared to the overall history of home prices in general. So I'm a visual person, so let me walk you through both verbally and visually what the price difference, comparison of the cost of living in the areas we mentioned, Charlotte, Union County, York County. And if you're coming from an area like New York, New Jersey, the Northeast, give you a snapshot of what those costs of living look like and what their differences are, using stats and information from NerdWallet to PayScale and overall stats from the county information. So it will give you a good highlight of what those costs look like so you can compare. Definitely let me know your thoughts and what they look like in your area as well. But let's dive in and see what they look like visually, and I'll talk you through those. Quick intermission. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to continue getting updated on all things going on in Charlotte, or like what it's like to live here, play, go to school, have whatever it is that you want to know going on here so you can make the best decision for you. If you're potentially looking to relocate, whether it's the next 6 days or 6 months, make sure to reach out anytime. I'm Steve Jarrell with the Longleaf Group at eXp Realty, and I love helping people just like you every single day make the best decision for themselves. All that said, let's jump back in and start talking about and learning about the cost of living and differences across the Charlotte and comparing the Northeast. Okay, well, let's take a look at our chart showing these different areas and price differences. We're really going to highlight some of the biggest cost attributors to our cost of living, whether it's cost of our homes, mortgage rates, or mortgage costs, monthly costs, comparing utilities, food cost, and just getting an overall feel of these costs and comparing them. So let's first start off when we're going to compare the Charlotte area. First, let's look at the monthly cost for a mortgage or renting in these areas, starting with the greater Charlotte Mecklenburg area. From a monthly cost and from a cost overall for your home, for a home in the area, as I mentioned, roughly around $450,000 is the average home price. Or from a rental perspective, you're looking right around about $1,700 a month in rent. Obviously, it goes much higher depending on the home. But if you're looking for rentals, anywhere from 1,700 to 2,000 plus a month. For your county, quite a bit less, anywhere in the $300 to $350,000 range. In many parts, rent is definitely lower, depending on the proximity to the city. And obviously, if you're in the Fort Mill area compared to outskirts of the York area, your price is going to be much different. But we're looking at a 3-bedroom home in particular for these examples. So that's what our barometer is for these costs. Union County, average anywhere from 450 up to 600,000 average. Obviously, it goes much higher. It's a much more upscale subdivisions, or I should say, there are much more upscale subdivisions in Union County. Rents are similar. Really depends on the neighborhood. Obviously, if you're dealing with higher priced homes, you're going to get much higher, from 2,500 a month plus, depending on those. So that's going to be your higher range for homes and price and monthly rent. And then comparing our friends up north, you're going to have a much higher price point on average, $700,000 to $900,000, or rents anywhere from 2,500 to 4,000 plus a month. So it really depends on the suburb, but you're going to have a higher cost of living. And this is the cost of living on the home side. And that's a big factor we see from anybody looking to relocate, especially from the Northeast, that the home prices is just a big factor, able to get the similar home or larger home than a great neighborhood for substantially less than what they're paying already. So that's a big factor. And then when we move down to property taxes, the range for Mecklenburg County, an effective rate anywhere from 0.4 to 0.6% is the assessment we typically see in Mecklenburg County. York County we're seeing the 0.25 to 0.4, and in Union County, 0.35 to 0.5 for your effective rate for taxes as well, giving you an idea of the range that you see, where it's lower overall, typically in the Union and South Carolina area. Some of that fluctuates, but you're kind of staying that same range. Now, when you're comparing to the Northeast, there is a big savings there that's seen in anybody that's living in the New York, New Jersey area, especially the Manhattan, the Long Island, some of those areas. You are going to see a substantial savings on the tax side as well, ranging from 1% to 1.5%, depending on the town. And you also have those school district taxes that play into a higher cost. You also have some really great schools in the Northeast as well. So there's trade-offs for some of those taxes, no doubt about it. But from a cost of living and comparing those to the Charlotte area in general, a big savings is going to be saved from the home price and appreciation in the the Charlotte area, and the taxes plays obviously a huge factor. When we're comparing the utility costs in the greater Charlotte area, and that includes the 3 primary areas we're comparing here, which is the Mecklenburg core Charlotte area, York County, South Carolina, and Union County, you generally have a very similar cost of utilities, and overall utility cost from a national average is going to be higher by about 1 to 1.4% than the national average for utility costs. So a little bit higher than the average, but not as high as the Northeast when it comes to the utility costs that are seen in the area and the average. And in the Northeast, utility costs often are significantly higher, especially when it's comparing the heating, cooling through the winter months, the summer months, which are, can have the extremes in the Northeast especially the colder side that we don't see in the Charlotte area. So that's also plays a factor, just the cost in general of heating and cooling, as I mentioned, for those areas. So the Northeast going to have a higher cost for the utility side and a higher cost as we jump down to the next comparison we're using for cost of living, which is food, groceries. On average, we're seeing much higher in New York, New Jersey, in many cases, whether it's buying groceries or going out to eat for the restaurants, anywhere from 20 to 40% higher averages we're seeing in the Charlotte area. So you have that higher price for the groceries. And as we compare the Charlotte area, we're as an average similar to utilities, about 1 to 2% higher than the national average, and very similar in the Union County and York County area, which are still slightly above the national average, but certainly not the comparison of the Northeast when it comes to those costs for groceries and utilities. So let's simply break this down for you so you get a good snapshot of what this all means when it comes to cost of living, especially comparing the major areas of the greater Charlotte area and the Northeast as our example area that a lot of people are relocating or considering relocating to Charlotte. Cost of living much higher on average in the Northeast compared to the greater Charlotte area. Price of homes, if the average is but close to $1 million for some of the major areas in the New York, New Jersey area, we're seeing 450,000 average home price in the Charlotte, Mecklenburg area for those single family homes. That's not including, townhouses, condos, 450 for single family. From a taxes, property and school taxes, which is a big consideration in New York, New Jersey, it can be anywhere close to double or more than what you pay in the Charlotte, Mecklenburg area. So taxes just are through the roof in a lot of areas in the Northeast. That is attractive if you're considering the Charlotte area. And then everyday costs, whether it's groceries or it's utilities, going out to eat, still is much less in the Charlotte areas, whether it's Union County or York County, cheaper in this area, the Charlotte area, which is a high part of cost of living, including housing. So all said, some big reasons, some big areas that contribute to the lesser cost of living in Charlotte versus the New York, New Jersey areas for sure. Finally, just to add the cherry on top to the overall story we're telling with the cost of living in the greater Charlotte area, comparing other areas, New York, New Jersey, Northeast, my pros and cons in a quick hit of the pros and cons. Some of the big pros, obviously, everyday costs, whether it's transportation, utilities, food, everything we just mentioned, obviously is much less than the New York, New Jersey area. And they're all pretty similar when you're comparing all three of the pillar areas of the greater Charlotte area we discussed. The other pro is the mild climate, which plays into the utilities cost. Obviously, it's a positive if you're trying to get away from extreme weather. Charlotte overall has a pretty mild climate with some shorter duration of the hot of summer or the cold of winter. Another big pro is it's continuing to grow and expand, and prices do continue to appreciate. So opportunities there to have equity from moving from an area that's cost more to putting it to work in the Charlotte area. Cons that absolutely should be considered are number one, the growth of the areas that are you may be moving into an area that's got a lot of green around it. Well, these areas are continuing to get developed. People are moving in, which creates traffic as infrastructure catches up to it. So if you're used to living, for example, in Manhattan or areas that are easily to commute because the roads are all there or you're walkable to your work. Well, if you're in a lot of parts of Charlotte, that's not the case because you may be 30 minutes, 40 minutes outside of the uptown area if that's where you're working. So you have those trade-offs and just the overall trade-offs of growth with schools getting overcrowded if areas continue to grow beyond the current capacity. So there are negatives that come from the growth of the area, but the question, as we've been answering about cost of living, very attractive in a lot of areas, especially if you're considering moving from some of the most expensive areas or more expensive areas across the United States, from the Northeast, the Northwest, the Californias, all of the areas that Charlotte has really just become a hub for relocation for all the reasons we spoke about. And thank you so much for joining me on our tour and overview of what is the real cost of living for the greater Charlotte area. There's a lot more factors that come into play and specific areas within the areas we discussed as a whole. So definitely reach out if you just have more questions about what the cost is in a specific area or neighborhood. I would love to help you in any way. I'm Steve Gerald with the Longleaf Group. Make sure to reach out anytime. All of our information is below. Make sure to like and subscribe so you will get updated all the time as we release new content. Thanks again. And until next time, I'll see you then.